Oklahoma City, November 2001, devoted dad Rob Andrew is looking forward to Thanksgiving with his children.
Thanksgiving was a big deal to him. Being thankful for what you have, that was who he was.
But very quickly, tragedy strikes Rob and his wife, Brenda, in their own home.
911.
I've been shot. My husband's been shot. Oh my God, there's blood everywhere.
What monster kills during the holidays?
Those two little kids had no clue that their world was changing right outside in their very own garage.
Who wants this loving father dead?
A month before he was killed, his brake lines had been cut.
That sounds like attempted murder, don't you think?
This was a planned attack.
$800,000, that has to be considered as a possible motive for murder.
You know, you can't control evil. Evil comes to you from out of nowhere.
Hello, I'm Nancy Grace. Oklahoma City at Thanksgiving, and the city celebrates in style. Parades in the streets, friends gather, everyone counting down until Christmas. For families in the midst of a breakup, it can be awkward and bittersweet. 1 month before Christmas, 2 days before Thanksgiving, Robert Andrew is alone. An advertising executive from Oklahoma, he's facing the holiday season without his wife, Brenda.
Brenda had filed for divorce, but it was not something he wanted. He was heartbroken over that. I know that particular Thanksgiving was a big deal to him because he was picking up the kids and taking them to have Thanksgiving dinner with his family. It was going to be a normal Thanksgiving, except Brenda wasn't part of the equation this time. But he went over to pick up his kids that night. And didn't get past the garage.
I've been shot. My husband's been shot. Okay, you and your husband have both been shot? Yes.
Who shot you?
I don't know.
You don't?
I don't know. They had on black masks. I don't know. Oh my God, there's blood everywhere.
Well, the incident happened. It's a quiet neighborhood. It's a suburban type neighborhood. Large homes, expensive. I'm thinking, why is this happening over there?
Roland Garrett is a retired detective from the Oklahoma City PD.
When I drive up the scene, I see a dozen police cars, ambulance, everybody's lights is flashing. And the lights of the home are on in the garage. The garage door is raised, the overhead garage door is up. I met my partner outside the crime scene. He said when the officers arrived at the scene, Brenda Andrew was leaning over Rob Andrew, her husband.
There had been 2 masked gunmen that had come into her garage. One had a shotgun and shot her husband. The other had a smaller pistol and shot her.
She had a gunshot wound to the upper part of her left arm.
Brenda is taken by EMS to the hospital to get treatment for her gunshot wound.
In television news, Thanksgiving was an easy holiday to work because there wasn't a lot of news going on, this being the exception. It came over the scanners, and so we jumped in the car, showed up, and there were police cars everywhere. We heard someone was dead in the garage, and there was another victim. He shows up to pick up his kids, and he gets killed in the garage on his way to celebrate a beautiful holiday, I'm sure, with his family and his children. How could that happen?
The kids were found inside the house watching television. Those two little kids had no clue that their world was changing right outside in their very own garage.
So at the time, they were removed from the scene and taken to a neighbor's house. Based on the information we received, it was two suspects, so we had patrolmen in the area, and we also had a helicopter checking the area. Spoke to the neighbors to find out if anybody saw anything or were there any security cameras. No cameras. We did have some neighbors that heard something. They say it sounded like a trash can banging or something, and that's about all they heard. The forensic investigators arrived at the scene, and they see what we got there.
Rob was laying on his back in the garage. There were 2 wounds. He was shot in his neck and in the side of his abdomen. There was a bag of tin cans nearby. Rob was likely trying to shield himself from the second shot.
And the forensic investigators located a shotgun shell on top of a minivan that was parked in the garage. And a bullet fragment in the door which leads from the garage to the interior of the house. No weapons were found at the scene. At the time, I still don't have much. No known reason why somebody would want to come kill this man in his garage.
I got a phone call from a coworker, and she said, "Did you hear?" And she said, "Rob is dead." And I just felt like it's indescribable, like your soul leaving your body or something. It's something I've never felt before and never have again, and hope I never do.
I knew that it would be important to talk to Brenda Andrew, the wife of the deceased. I was hoping that she would be able to come up with something to help lead us to some suspects. I go to the hospital, and Brenda was still in the emergency room being treated. Her condition was going to be non-life-threatening. She was just stoic, just sitting there, basically answering my questions. She told me they were going through a divorce, and he had moved out a couple months prior. He got an apartment 3 miles away from their house.
Husband and father, Rob Andrew, comes to the home to get the children. He's taking them to a Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' home. Before they leave, wife Brenda asks Rob to check the furnace.
That night, her pilot light on her furnace had gone out, and she needed some help with that. As he crouched down to take a look, suddenly 2 masked men appeared in the garage. One fired a shot at Rob.
She was shot, and she was exiting the garage to go back in the house. She went inside, called 911, and she went back out to check on Rob, and the guys were gone.
Brenda was unable to offer any clues as to who the suspects could possibly be. She had no clue who would want to hurt Rob.
You know, it could be a home invasion, or it could be Rob getting followed home. You kind of wonder, is this going to be solvable? It was all dependent on what we was gonna find out about the victim and his wife.
Brenda and Rob both grew up in Enid, Oklahoma. Rob grew up in a conservative Baptist household with his 3 brothers. Brenda had grown up in a very conservative household as well.
Everyone knew the story about how Rob and Brenda met. It was in Enid, in the summer, at the public swimming pool. Brenda walked in. Rob had always said, I saw this cute girl in the swimsuit, and said, I'm gonna marry her. And he did.
Shortly after getting married, the couple moves to Oklahoma City, where Rob is offered the job of his dreams.
Rob was an advertising executive for Jordan Advertising here in Oklahoma City, and he had done very well for himself, had a great reputation in this town and in the advertising world.
In 1990, Rob and Brenda Andrew start a family of their own. First, the birth of their daughter, Tricity. Then, a few years later, they welcome a baby boy, Parker.
He was the stereotypical family man, loved his wife, loved his kids. Told us all the time how proud he was of all of them. I mean, he lived for his family. And I know it sounds like a stereotype or a cliche to say that he was the nicest guy, but he really was the nicest guy. He did things for people without asking, and he didn't expect anything in return. His positivity came from his faith. He was a very religious man. Rob went on mission trips with his church. They would go overseas and build houses for a village that didn't really have housing, and he loved it.
Brenda was your typical stay-at-home mom. She taught Sunday school, she baked brownies with her kids, like the perfect wife and mother.
Brenda would come up to the office with the kids every now and then. She seemed very happy and devoted to them, devoted to Rob. They absolutely seemed like a strong couple.
Rob thought that this was his happily ever after. But just 2 months before Thanksgiving, Rob had left the house at Brenda's insistence.
He was heartbroken and living in an apartment and just desperately praying that she would have second thoughts. He wanted to stay married to her. He still loved her with all of his heart. He believed if he prayed hard enough and kept at it, that he could turn her around, that they could be in love again.
Despite the problems in his relationship, you know, he was really trying to, you know, take care of his kids and stay a part of their life despite what's going on with him and his wife.
It seems no one has anything bad to say about Rob, but when it comes to wife Brenda, detectives hear a very different story.
Brenda very much put on a June Cleaver sort of role, but that wasn't who she was.
She looked like the perfect stay-at-home mom. Sunday school, innocent. It was quite the opposite.
Brenda had a lot of skeletons in her closet.
Thanksgiving is truly a time for gratitude and for families to gather and give thanks. Despite his troubled marriage, Rob Andrew wants his children to have a wonderful holiday. So who would want to gun down this dad? Gun down in cold blood when he's picking up his children for Thanksgiving dinner. Detectives speak to those closest to Rob Andrew to learn he is a star advertising executive. His success buys a beautiful home for his family, and it all seems ideal, except his stay-at-home wife, Brenda, is not staying home.
For all intents and purposes, she looked like the perfect stay-at-home mom. It was quite the opposite. She'd had multiple affairs with different men.
And it starts almost immediately after their marriage.
As part of the work I did with Rob, we were in the car for 2 hours at a time, at least once, if not twice a week. Almost every time he would call Brenda, and I noticed that they never said, "I love you." One time I asked him, "Why do you never say I love you on the phone?" And he told me that she had said soon after they got married, "That makes me feel uncomfortable. Do not ever tell me that again." I mean, at the time, I was newly married, and I couldn't even fathom a world in which I didn't end a conversation with my wife that way. It seemed bizarre. On subsequent trips, Rob would tell me about affairs he believed Brenda was having. I remember asking, "What makes you think that?" He told a story about coming home and seeing a box on the bed with, fancy ribbon. And he opened it up to look, and it was lingerie. And he thought, he was looking forward to that. But then he never got to see it. The biggest one was they had come back from a trip to Mexico with another couple. And Rob strongly believed that Brenda was having an affair with the other man. Just the way they interacted during the trip, the way they were always sneaking off together during the trip. And it turned out to be true. She was sinning, but yet he forgave her. He still wanted to be married to her. He was not about to break that vow. That was not something he ever wanted to even consider.
We knew that she was carrying on with some other men, but just because of her doing whatever she was doing with the other gentleman didn't necessarily mean that she was going to be a killer. We got several men we need to speak to. We have to make sure that that man wouldn't have a reason to want Rob gone.
Detectives managed to track down one of Brenda's lovers. He's a friend of her husband, Rob, and his name is Jim.
From Jim, I found out that he had been involved in an affair with Brenda. Jim was going over to the Andrew home when Rob wasn't there. Once Rob knew or found out, Rob had actually told him, "I don't want you at my house." And so he stopped going over there, stayed away from Brenda. He told me that it had ended after about 3 months. I thought he was believable. I don't think he had any reason to go over there and shoot Rob.
This story continued to reveal different layers, like an onion. You're peeling all of this back. And there are so many unknowns. People started thinking, who's this mystery person? Could this person have had anything to do with it?
3 days after Thanksgiving, Oklahoma City PD gets a call from Brenda and Rob's next-door neighbors, Judy and Dean Gigstag. They've just returned from Thanksgiving out of town.
They noticed there were some things in their home that weren't as they left them. She notices her shoe rack is no longer in her closet. It was broken and placed under her bed. They notice that the attic trap door is slightly ajar, as if somebody has been recently in the attic. And that's when she made the realization that somebody was in her house, most likely the same person that killed her neighbor.
They're thinking that he's still up there with the murder weapon and watching whatever you're doing. So they called 911.
Police do not find an intruder in the house. However, the search of the Gigstad home reveals surprising evidence.
We found a 16-gauge shotgun shell on the floor in one of the bedrooms. One of our forensic investigators went to the attic and he located several .22 caliber bullets.
When the evidence is analyzed, the detectives are informed that the ammunition found in the neighbor's home matched the 2 guns that were used to commit the murder and the shooting of Brenda.
Finding the shell casing in the home and the things disturbed will make us believe that the suspect possibly ran over to the Gigstad home and was actually in the home hiding out while we're at the crime scene investigating.
This would explain why there was not much of a trail to follow. Nobody saw the gunman running from the neighborhood. From the attic, there's a window with a clear view to the garage where this crime was committed. So it's very possible that the murderer had been stalking Brenda and Rob.
It doesn't take long for police to discover Rob has been in the crosshairs of a determined killer.
Oklahoma City Police Department.
Hi there. I'd like to report a client. My brake lines have been cut. That sounds like attempted murder, don't you think?
Welcome back. Thanksgiving is one of the busiest travel times of the whole year. So many people leave town to visit family, homes are often left empty. That's when police discover Rob Andrew's killer has hidden in the neighbor's home.
Detectives knew that the killer had been in the neighbor's house, but there were no signs of forced entry. So the question was, how did they get in? Who had access to this house? The Gigstads told the police that their son Jeff had a key to their home.
It said that their son had came to the house before they came back from out of town. He came over to the house to grab something. So I knew that it would be important to talk to him about why he went to the house and when he went.
Jeff's alibi was his wife, and it was rock solid. On the evening of November 20th, they attended a family Thanksgiving. He really didn't have any connection to Rob. Jeff informed the investigators that the day following the murder, he stopped by his parents' home. He was retrieving a playpen that he wanted for his little baby.
When Jeff picks up the playpen, he just misses crossing paths with the killer who's hiding in his parents' home. It's a premeditated murder plan. Detective Roland Garrett soon finds out it's not the first attempt on Rob's life.
One morning in October, Rob was backing out of his driveway and noticed that his brakes weren't working. That's when he realized there was brake fluid in his driveway. He took his car to a mechanic shop where they showed him that his brake lines had been cleanly cut. It really seemed as if someone had purposefully tampered with his car.
Oklahoma City Police Department.
Hi there. I'd like to report a client. My brake lines have been cut. That sounds like attempted murder, don't you think?
That same day, Rob receives a call from an anonymous woman, and she tells him that he needs to go to the hospital because Brenda had been in a car accident.
So, Rob, just to you, I was kind of let you know that you need to go pick up your wife, Brenda, at Norman Regional Hospital.
Rob Andrew has a friend drive him to the hospital, but when he arrives, wife Brenda is nowhere to be found. She's never been in an accident.
It was just an attempt to get him to drive somewhere quickly and potentially have a wreck and either kill himself or seriously hurt himself.
Rob didn't recognize the voice from the woman that called him. He would have recognized Brenda's voice, and it wasn't Brenda. So now we got somebody else involved here. We got another player. We got to find out how deep they're involved in this and what else did they do besides make that phone call.
Who is this unknown female caller?
Given Brenda's history of multiple affairs, perhaps she had upset the wife of one of her lovers. Police had to consider it was possibly a female killer.
Is the mysterious caller someone in Brenda and Rob's circle of friends? Detectives interview members of their congregation and they uncover a critical new lead.
We found that they had had some problems at the church. Brenda had gotten some hot water at the church by the way she was dressing. She was starting to wear low-cut dresses and dress like, you know, sexy for church. That definitely made a lot of them suspicious. Brenda was a Sunday school teacher, and at one point she was teaching Sunday school with another gentleman. They were seen by fellow church members at lunch holding hands. His name was James Pavat.
James Pavat was very involved in his church, was an insurance man by trade, and very close with a lot of the people in the church, including Rob. They even went hunting together. James Pavat even went to the Andrews' house for dinner on occasion and was very close with that family.
It became very evident to the congregation that Brenda and James were having an affair. They were actually asked to step down as Sunday school teachers as a result of that.
James was crazy about Brenda, just felt very connected to her and loved Brenda dearly. Seems like he loved her so much he would have done anything to keep that love and that relationship going.
James had left his wife earlier that year for Brenda, and so he had every motive to want Brenda and Rob not to be together.
James Pavat was in the military prior to his insurance life. So highly skilled, highly trained.
James had training in sniper shooting. He was very comfortable around guns.
Something else about him is that he walked around, he bragged about being a commando and killing a bunch of people in the military. Based on the information that we had, James provided somebody that we needed to consider as a possible suspect. We made several attempts to reach Mr. Pavat, calling his home, going by, never located him. We eventually got a phone call from his lawyer who said he wouldn't be making himself available. He's not going to come in and talk.
And then, out of the blue, detectives get another phone call from Rob and Brenda's next-door neighbor, Judy Gigstad.
Suddenly, Judy remembered that they also had given a key to their neighbor, Brenda Andrew.
Brenda and Rob were friends with them for years, and anytime they would leave town, they would watch over what was going on, so they had a key.
Knowing that Brenda Andrew had a key, that she had access to their house. And since she was carrying on with James Pavat, we were thinking she might be involved.
Could she have been part of this? Did she help plan this attack?
If Rob Andrew is truly giving his wife Brenda the divorce she wants, why would she and James Pivot want to kill him? Detectives focus on the details of Rob and Brenda's divorce, looking for a motive.
Rob Andrew was kicked out of the house the end of September, a couple of months before he was murdered. They had a legal separation. He was providing support money for Brenda and the kids. But the Andrews were in dispute about an $800,000 life insurance policy.
Rob and Brenda had taken an insurance policy out for Rob to take care of Brenda and the kids in case something were to happen to him, because they were his everything.
But detectives discovered the insurance policy on Rob Andrew was written and prepared by James Pivot.
$800,000, that has to be considered as a possible motive for murder. Especially because the very man that had sold him the policy was now having an affair with his wife.
Thanksgiving marks the beginning of the Christmas holiday, when people get to spend time with friends and family, people they hold dear. For Brenda Andrew, this holiday is different. For her, it's more of a nightmare. She's recovering from a gunshot wound, her husband has been murdered, and now she's a suspect in his murder. And what about Rob Andrew's family? They'll never have the opportunity to share a holiday with Rob. Instead, they've got to plan his funeral.
It was just really sad to think that something this horrific happened right before the Thanksgiving holiday, where you get together around the table with your family, you get to spend time with your loved ones, and he shows up to pick up his kids, and he gets killed in the garage.
By now, rumors are circulating about Brenda's possible involvement in her husband Rob's murder.
The feeling going into any funeral is bad enough, but Rob's funeral was very strange because everyone was sort of wondering, is Brenda gonna show up?
We were outside of the church, and I remember thinking Brenda and his children were not there. They actually held the service for about an hour, hoping they would show up. And they didn't.
Who doesn't show up to their own spouse's funeral and doesn't let the kids come to their dad's funeral? How heartless do you have to be? At that point, when she didn't show up at the funeral, I knew she had fled. I was like, she is leaving town.
We received a phone call and were advised that Brenda and the kids were not at the funeral. So we went by the house to see if they were there. They weren't there.
Detectives go to James Pivot's home next. They discover he's also packed up and gone.
Can't reach him on the phone, can't find him anywhere. They done vanished.
With Brenda's disappearance, it's looking more and more likely she is James Pivot's accomplice in Rob's murder. Investigators still don't know the identity of the woman who called Rob when his brake lines were cut. But can they go from just suspecting Brenda to proving she's actually involved in husband Rob's murder? Detective Roland Garrett comes up with a plan and the forensic science needed to make it work.
When I spoke to Brenda down at the hospital, I collected her clothing for evidence. She had some gunshot residue on her blouse, so we had it analyzed.
Brenda sustained only a minor wound, which is a little odd considering that her husband had been shot twice with a shotgun and that she had only been shot by a smaller caliber weapon in the arm.
The gunshot was found to be a close contact wound, which means it was 2 to 4 inches away from her skin when the gun was fired.
What this meant to the investigators is that she was shot at close range, not from across the garage as she had told them. Forensic evidence also showed that blood spatter found on Brenda's jeans belonged to Rob. It indicated that she had to have been close by, within a foot or so of her husband when he was shot and killed.
So that tells us that the second shotgun blast that he received came from her. And when she shot him, it splattered back onto her jeans.
Just 3 weeks before Christmas, the last piece of the puzzle falls into place.
We get a phone call from an attorney that wants to bring a witness in and talk to us. And that witness is James Pavat's daughter. And she has some information for us. Her name was Jana Larson. We found out that she was the woman that had made the phone call telling Rob to drive to the hospital.
So, Rob, you cannot know that you need to go pick up your wife, Brenda, at Norman Regional Hospital.
She said she was asked to do that by her father.
Jana didn't know all the details of what was happening in that relationship between Brenda and Rob and her dad, James Pavat. She was coerced into doing it.
That was probably the last piece of evidence that we needed at the time. We were able to get a warrant for both Brenda and James Pavat for murder 1.
Detectives contact the FBI, and very soon, an international manhunt is underway for wife Brenda Andrew and her lover, James Pavat. Daughter Jana Larson agrees to work with authorities. She tells them everything she knows.
And the same day as Rob Andrew's funeral, James Pavat actually showed up at her house, and he had Brenda Andrew and the kids were with him. They were outside in a van. He got on her computer, and he was looking up what countries wouldn't extradite back to the United States.
It seems Brenda Andrew and James Pavat are planning to celebrate another holiday, Christmas, with the children, south of the border.
They left Jana Larson's house in vehicles, heading south. They were headed to Mexico, what she thought. And we also knew that they didn't have a lot of money. Most of the money had already been frozen in their accounts, and eventually the money may run out, and it might help us capture them.
The detectives were doing everything they could to look for them, and it went on for months.
It was a tough Thanksgiving and a tougher Christmas in a way because they were gone. Nobody knew where they were. Were they alive? We didn't know. Everyone was really concerned for the kids, but also just wanting justice for Rob. And every day they were gone, it was just more and more infuriating that they were going to get away with it.
After the brutal murder of her husband, Rob, Brenda Andrew and her sex partner, James Pavat, take her 2 children. They flee to Mexico during the holidays. Rob Andrew's family and friends are forced to spend Christmas not just without him, but without his children, too. Meanwhile, detectives are piecing together the details of Rob's murder.
What happened on the night of November 20th, 2001 was predetermined. Brenda had planned this. She knew that Rob was coming to pick up his children. She asked him to come into the garage and light the pilot light, knowing all along that she was luring him to his death.
And Pavat was already in the garage. He came around probably from behind the minivan, shot him with the first shot. She took the shotgun, shot him with the second shot. And then Pavat took the .22 shot her in the arm. He left the house, go next door. She went in the house, called 911.
911.
I've been shot. My husband's been shot. Okay, you and your husband have both been shot? Yes.
Who shot you?
I don't know.
You don't?
I don't know. They had on black masks. I don't know. Oh my God, there's blood everywhere.
It was some evil, a lot of evil going on with Brenda. She was all about money. She wanted that insurance money.
Weeks turn into months, hope fading that Rob Andrews' killers will ever be brought to justice.
The warrants were out for the arrest of Brenda and James, but they were no longer in the country. It's much harder to capture somebody when they're out of your jurisdiction.
Once they crossed the border, that warrant wasn't going to be something that Mexican authorities could arrest them on. But then at some point, James Pavard started calling Jana.
She had a conversation with her father, who was in Mexico with Brenda. They were running out of money and didn't know what to do. The FBI worked with Jana to lure James and Brenda back to the United States where they could be arrested. Jana promised her dad that she could get them money.
James Pavard is out of options. The couple on the run, and they need money. He agrees to his daughter's plan, and he returns to the U.S. Police notify border officials to be on the lookout.
3 months after the murder, they came back to the border, and one of the Border Patrol agents was familiar with the bulletin that was out. We got the phone call. They were captured.
They were taken into custody and charged with the murder of Rob Andrew. The kids were found unharmed, and they were sent to be with Rob's family.
It was such a relief to hear that, knowing that Brenda and James were caught, but knowing the kids were safe, that was even better.
James Pavard's trial was first. It lasted a few weeks. The key witness at the trial was Pavard's daughter, Jana.
You always wonder, like, you know, the jury doesn't know Rob. Like, I know Rob. Are they going to get it right? We always worry that they're going to get away with it, but luckily they didn't.
James was convicted of the first-degree murder of Rob Andrew, and he was sentenced to death.
August 2004, Brenda Andrews' trial begins.
When I saw her again at trial, she didn't have any remorse in her face or her actions.
I think the timing of Brenda's crime was purely opportunistic. She knew that Rob was going to come and get those children for the holiday, and he would probably have his guard down.
Here is a father showing up to get his kids on his way to celebrate a beautiful holiday with his family and his children. And just, how could you do that?
I mean, I do believe in evil, and I do believe she is evil.
Within a month, Brenda Andrew is found guilty for the murder of husband Rob, and she is sentenced to the death penalty.
Having hereto found the defendant, Brenda Evers Andrew, guilty of murder in the first degree, fix her punishment at death.
When I heard that first James was found guilty, and then especially when Brenda was found guilty, I was overjoyed. I was so happy that they didn't get away with it. As clever as she thought she was, all the steps they had taken, they underestimated the way things work.
To orchestrate and commit a crime, killing the father of the children, Thanksgiving time. It had to be a evil, vindictive person. You know, you reap what you sow.
James Pivot is currently sitting on the Oklahoma death row, awaiting his execution date. Brenda Andrew waiting for her execution date in the Mabel Bassett CI Correctional Institution in McLeod, Oklahoma. She's currently the only woman on death row in the entire state of Oklahoma.
I think about Rob every Thanksgiving. It's just impossible not to. He sort of embodied the idea of the holidays, the spirit of the holidays, you know, being with your family, being thankful for what you have, cherishing those times. That was who he was. So I always want to think about his life and not his death, and be thankful for the time that I did get with him.
What should have been a wonderful and joyous holiday shattered by cheating, infidelity, and murder. A horrible and tragic end to the marriage of a loving dad, an evil wife, and her ruthless sex partner. I'm Nancy Grace. Thank you for joining us here on The Christmas Killings.